Okay, we're going to talk about linear inequalities, and we're going to talk about something called intervals or interval notation. So I want to remind you of something. And if you don't want to take this down in your notes, you could just pay attention. I want to remind you or do a little bit of review about a simple equation. Okay, very, very simple. What if I ask you to solve x plus 5 is equal to 18? What would you do to solve that equation? You would simply subtract 5 from both sides, and you would get x is 13. And that means that 13 is the solution. 13 is the only number that if you put it in the place of x, that it will make that a true statement. Okay? Now, did you draw a picture of that for me? Well, no, that sounds kind of silly. You could have said, well, okay, you want to see it on a number line? Well, let's say that's 12, that's 13, that's 14. Locate 13, and you would probably do that and say, okay, you wanted a picture of it? There's a picture. Can y'all see this okay in the back? Okay. All right. Now, I want to talk about how that relates to our new topic of inequalities. Oh, yay. Wipe. All right. In the inequalities, there are 4 inequality symbols that we're going to be exposed to. There are more, but we're only going to look at 4 of them. And they are the less than or equal to, the greater than or equal to. So we're only going to look at those 4 symbols. In equality, the prefix in means not. So the left side and the right side are not necessarily equal unless you get one of these combined symbols right here. All right, let's take a similar problem. Let's take x plus 5 is greater than 18. All right. Solving an inequality is similar, very similar to solving an equation. You notice that we had our equal line over here. Now we're going to have a barrier where the inequality symbol is. I'm going to do all the same steps. I'm going to isolate x by subtracting 5 from both sides. And I get x is greater than 13. So you can see the similarities between the two processes. There is a difference, though, because in the original problem, over here on the left, you have one answer, one solution, 13. But on the right, you have an infinite number of answers because x can be any real number that's greater than 13. So what's an example of an answer? 14 or 15, 19, 23.6. What about 13 itself? Is 13 greater than 13? No. What about 13.1? Yes. Now, since there are an infinite number of answers, it is somewhat useful to graph on a number line the answer set. So I'm going to graph it in blue. So I'm going to locate 13, and I'm going to do this once, and then I'm going to show you a new way to do it. 13, everything to the right. Now, why did I put a hole at 13?
That's your x with 18.
Okay, it's kind of the boundary of the answers, isn't it? X is anything bigger than the number 13. But why didn't I put the dot like I did over here on the left side? It's not, right, it's not a single answer. In fact, 13 is not an answer at all. 13 is not bigger than 13. So I could indicate it by putting an open circle here or a hole here. I could. There is a more current way to write that. So the second way I write it is the way you're going to see it in my math lab. We'll still locate 13. We'll still be talking about all values that are greater than 13. But to show somebody that 13 is not included, we use a parentheses. So this parentheses means not included. Okay, and in a minute I'll show you what do you put if it is included, and I will show you that in just a minute. Now, you've got your answer as an inequality. You've got your answer as a number line. There is a third way to write the answer, and the third way is an interval. An interval is a way to write a little piece of the real numbers. When you write an interval, you put from small to large. You put from left to right. Always. Whoops. An interval always has a comma in it, and you are going to put the smallest number in the answers first. You're going to put a comma, and then you're going to put the largest number in the answer set. Now, on this number line, let me move the screen just a little bit. On this number line, the leftmost value possible is negative infinity. And an infinity symbol looks like an 8 laying on its side. The largest possible is positive infinity. Those are the two extremes. So if I want to name as an interval the part that I have marked in blue, where does it start? What is its smallest possible value? 13, but I think we're in agreement that really it should be just the first number bigger than 13. Only there is no such number. Is 13.1 the first number? Well, what about 13.01? That's even smaller, closer to 13. So there is no such first number. So what I do is use those parentheses to say, but don't include 13. The same thing I used up here. And then how far does it go to the right? Infinity. And because the concept of infinity cannot be contained, I always use parentheses on infinity. Now I want you to be patient with yourself and patient with me as I talk about intervals, because it's going to take several examples for you to understand everything we need to know about them. You always need to get the two numbers in the interval written in the correct order, and it must be left to right. On the number line, left to right. Okay? Then you have to decide, do I use parentheses or do I use another symbol? And I'm going to talk about the other symbol. Okay, if, this is just an if, the solution were x is greater than or equal to 13. Okay, so this is what if. How would it differ? Well, on the number line, I would still locate 13, but instead of using parentheses, because 13 is not included, 13 is included in this one, so the difference is I use a bracket. You can sort of remember this because if there is equal in the inequality symbol, if there is an equal, that's a little line, and the bracket has the little lines. That might help you remember. And it goes everywhere to the right. What would it look like as an interval? Okay. As far as the numbers, do you agree that it still goes from 13 to infinity?
Yes. There'll be a bracket.
The 13 will be in a bracket this time. That's the only difference when there's equal as part of the symbol. Infinity, always, always parentheses. This interval would be, you would say, it goes from 13 to infinity, and 13 is included in the solution. Whereas this upper one, right here, from 13 to infinity, but 13 is not included. And I apologize, have y'all noticed that in the past I would get a little circle, a little kind of purplish dot when I pointed at something? Well, evidently it didn't load that little piece of its instructions today. So can you see that little microscopic dot? Okay, well, I'll try to wiggle it real good when I'm wanting you to look at something, because sometimes I make the mad mistake of pointing to something on my screen with my finger, which does no good because you can't see that. So I will try to wiggle that little baby dot. All right, let's take a look at the MyMathLab. All right, the first couple of questions, what they have you do is switch between interval notation, number line graph, inequality. Okay, so we've got 3 forms, and we're going to practice going between them, and then I will do some summary statements in just a minute. Let me see if I can enlarge that on your screen. Okay, I can enlarge it a little bit, but I will have to scroll back and forth. All right, number 1 says, graph the set of numbers given in interval notation. Then write the inequality statement in X describing the numbers graphed. Okay, now the interval notation, it's a little bit small for y'all to see projected, so I'm going to rewrite it. Here's what it looks like. From 5 to infinity, and 5 is included. Okay, so 5 to infinity. Will my interval, is it heading off to the right or heading off to the left? To the right. So as I look at these choices, it looks like A is a possibility because it goes to the right, and it looks like D is a possibility because it goes to the right. So I definitely know it is not B and it is not C. Are y'all okay with that? Okay. Now, you see a bracket, which means the 5 is included. Your graph mimics that. So which one can you see from wherever you're sitting?
A.
It is A. It is choice A is correct because this parentheses is what tells you that's not the right one. Now the last part says to write it as an inequality. Now as an inequality, you must start with the variable in question. So I'll put, they told me to use letter X. Now this went to the right. Do numbers get greater or smaller as they go to the right? Greater. So I will put the greater than symbol. Is it equal as well?
Yes.
Yes, because you saw a bracket. So greater than or equal to, and by the way, the inequality symbol always matches the arrow. So you see the arrow up there on choice A, and you see the direction that you've got this pointing. It is greater than or equal to, and then just the number in question, 5. What would have been the answer if D had been correct? What would you have written down as the inequality? You would not have equal with it. You would just have X is greater than 5. Okay, so this one, X is greater than 5. But that wasn't the right answer. Okay, let's look at number 2. Number 2 says, graph the set of numbers in interval notation. Then you're going to write it as an inequality. Okay, here it is as an interval, and I'll write it larger. Negative infinity, comma, -3. Now, I don't think I talked about this earlier, so this will be our first exposure to this. On the left, it is at negative infinity, and it's coming to -3. So will this arrow be going to the left or to the right? To the left. Negative infinity is to the left. which means that A is a possibility, and it means D is a possibility. This one is not, and this one is not, because they're going the wrong way. So it has from negative infinity to negative 3, but is negative 3 included?
No.
No. You look for one that has the parentheses at negative 3, and I believe we see it down here on choice D. This is the right one. The reason that A is not correct, it had a bracket. Okay, so please notice negative infinity is this way, positive infinity is off to the right, which, okay. The last thing it says to do is write an inequality statement. If it's going to the left, by the way, I always start with X. If it's going to the left, then is it a less than or a greater than? It's a less than. Does it have equal with it? No, because it didn't have a bracket, and you just put in the number negative 3. Less than to the left, greater than to the right. Let's look at a couple of others. Okay, here's number 3. It says graph the this one, by the way, we're starting out this time with an inequality. We're going to graph it, and then we're going to write the interval. So we need to be able to start with anything and end with anything. All right, this says x less than or equal to negative 9. Okay, looking at it on a number line, will it be going to the left or to the right?
To the left.
To the left, because it says less than. So I know it is not choice C and it is not choice B. It says less than or equal to. So what symbol will I find at the number negative 9? I will find a bracket. It's very hard for y'all to see displayed way back there at the back of the room. That's a parentheses. It is choice A because that is a bracket. Now it says write it as an interval. Well, in an interval, you're always going to write it left, comma, right. So where does choice A on the left, how far does it go?
Negative 15.
Negative infinity. Negative 15 is just the last number that they printed on here, but it goes past it. So it's negative infinity till you get to,
Negative 9.
okay, so I'll write it here. It is negative infinity, comma, just tell me what number.
Less than. The number.
Just the number.
Negative 9.
Negative 9. So an interval just has two quantities. Okay? The infinity always gets a parentheses. Now, you have to make a decision. Does the negative 9 get a parentheses or a bracket? Bracket. Because it was included, because there was equal. So anytime there's equal as part of the inequality symbol, like way up here, that means that there will be a bracket in the graph, there will be a bracket in the interval. If your interval includes negative infinity, it always comes first. If your interval includes positive infinity, it always comes second.
So if it's negative or positive, it always has a parentheses, right?
Yes. No matter what, either of the infinities get a parentheses. Yes, sir?
How do you know where to put the bracket on which side?
It always goes, if there is going to be a bracket, it will go around the number in question. Like in this case, the negative 9. Never will there be a bracket on infinity. Okay, let's look at number 4. I have the statement x is less than 1/5. Okay, x is less than 1/5. So I'm going to go looking for first a graph. Which of these graphs is right? Well, less than goes to the left. So it is definitely not B or D. Now it says strictly less than. So what symbol will I find at the number 1/5? A parentheses. Now I don't know that you can see it projected very well. That's a bracket. That's parentheses, which means which one is correct? C. The last thing you have to do is write the interval. Just remember the interval must be left, comma, right. So what is the leftmost value? Okay, you never get to put an X in an interval. Okay, it's going to be implied. So out here to the left is negative infinity, and it goes to the fraction 1/5. Now, negative infinity gets a parentheses. 1/5, what does it get? Parentheses also. Why? What? Because it does not have equal as part of the symbol. Correct. Are you sort of okay? 3 forms. All right, I want to take just a minute to write a couple of review comments. Or maybe it should be called a summary. Whoop. All right, let's suppose that I have the answer in inequality. Maybe we've solved a problem, and we get x is greater than 2. Could you write that? Could you draw that as a number line? Okay, what would it mean? You'd have your number line. What's the one and only number that would be real important to have on your line? 2. Now, will this solution set, this group of answers, will it be off to the right of 2 or to the left of 2? To the right. It's greater than. And that arrow tells you, the inequality symbol tells you which way to go. Is 2 included or not? Not. So I'll use a parentheses. Inequality, number line. The next thing we need to know is what will it look like as an interval? Well, it has to be from left to right. What's the leftmost value?
Infinity?
Okay, on the left,
Oh, no, 2.
2. And on the right,
Infinity.
infinity. Always parentheses at the infinity, and this time parentheses at the 2. So inequality, number line, interval. Let's look at another one. Let's suppose that I had the inequality of x is less than or equal to 4. What would that look like on a number line? Okay, what number do I need to write down? I need to have a 4. Will the solution set be to the left of 4 or the right of 4? Left, because it says less than. Will it include 4? Yes, and what symbol do I use? Bracket. If you're looking at the number line, you can pretty easily write the interval. You look from left to right. What is the leftmost value? Negative infinity. And the rightmost value? 4. The negative infinity must have parentheses, and then what goes at the 4? Bracket. Okay, are we feeling sort of okay about intervals? Okay. Let's go on to problem number 5. We're going to solve now inequalities, and I have to make a little statement about it, and I'm going to try to write it up at the top. All right. All are the same for solving equations, comma, except if you divide both sides by a negative somehow erase some things, a negative coefficient, comma, the symbol reverses. When we need that one little exception, I will call it to your attention. The rules for solving inequalities are the same as the rules for solving equations, except if you divide both sides by a negative coefficient, then the symbol, meaning the inequality symbol, reverses. And I'll go over that more in a minute. I just wanted it written in your notes somewhere. All right, problem number 5. I will come back up to it, but I want to work on it down here. All right, number 5. I'm supposed to solve 5x minus 5 is greater than 3x minus 7. Oops. All right, even though this is an inequality, I still have the same barrier. I do have one little comment, though, to make that's kind of important when you have variables on both sides. You know, when we were solving equations, it's just all up to you. Pick whichever one you want to get rid of. It's still true that you could get rid of either one, but I recommend get the variable on the right. Get the variable on the right. It's just going to save you a lot of grief if you will always do that. Which means I don't have any choice. I need to get rid of 3x. What does that leave me with? 2x minus 5 greater than negative 7. Okay? Now, even though it's an inequality symbol, all of my steps are the same. I look to the left. Is there a constant for me to get rid of? Yes. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. I am 2x is greater than, one's negative and one's positive, so I subtract negative 2. Okay, divide by the coefficient, pause for just a second. Is that coefficient a negative number?
No.
No, so I don't have to worry anything about that reversing. This 2 is a positive 2, so nothing weird's happening. X is greater than negative 1. Now that's my answer as an inequality. It will be your job in Math Lab to then figure out about its graph. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a number line. Doesn't look very good, but all right. What is the number I need to make sure is visible on my number line? Negative 1. Now x is supposed to be greater than that. So which way will it go? It'll go to the right. And what symbol will I put at negative 1? The parentheses, which means not included. Is everybody okay with the number line? All right, now that's the second form of my answer. It will be multiple choice in my Math Lab. Okay, so all I wrote over there was number line. The third way you need to be able to represent your answer is as an interval. Personally, I look at the number line, and that tells me how to write the interval. Left value, right value. What's the leftmost value? -1, comma, infinity. Because remember, this direction is positive infinity, this direction is negative infinity. So it is 1 to infinity. The infinity gets parentheses. What about the -1? It gets parentheses also, and that's an interval. In MATLAB, you'll need to be able to express your answers in all forms. Inequality, number line, interval. The number line will always be a matching part. Or multiple choice, I'm sorry, it will be multiple choice. When you take a test over this, you will be given the task of solving an inequality like we did, giving me the inequality answer. I will have a number line ready for you to graph, and then I will have a box waiting for you to write the interval in. So you'll have to write your answer in 3 forms. All right, let's look at number 6.
You didn't do the graph on number 5?
Pardon me?
You didn't choose the graph?
Okay, if we went back and chose the graph, we drew one.
Oh, okay.
But if we were to look back here at number 5, it was choice D because it went to the right. You can't see it on the screen. And it had a parentheses. Okay? All right. So now let's look at number 6, and I'm just going to work in this notebook paper space. I have 9x minus 4 less than or equal to 10x minus 3x. All right, solving this inequality. What will be your first step? Okay, now I heard a couple of things. I think somebody said combine. Somebody else said subtract 10x. Now, step number 1 is simplifying. And there are like terms on the right-hand side. So before you go off and try to move the 10x, recognize they were like terms and call that right side 7x. So I have 9x minus 4 is less than or equal to 7x. So I needed to do that first. Now, if this were an equation, I might do it differently, but it's an inequality, and I've asked you to get rid of the variable that's on the right. That gives you 2x minus 4 less than or equal to, okay, now 0. Those are inverses of each other, and I get 0. Now, my variable is on the left, so what's my next step?
Subtract 4. But you can't subtract 4.
Add 4.
Okay, actually I'm going to add 4.
Oh, okay.
Now, it wouldn't matter whether it's adding it or subtracting. I can do it to 0 because 0 is the identity. I would just get that number. So I get 2x less than or equal to 4 and divide. When I do division, I always pause and think, am I invoking that weird rule that says to reverse things? No, I'm dividing by a positive 2. So I simply get x is less than or equal to 2. I have the inequality. So next, I want to draw a number line. I locate 2. Since it says x is less than or equal to 2, which way is less than? Left. And the number in question is 2. Is 2 part of the solution?
Yes.
So I use a bracket. Now I need to write an interval. What will the interval be? It has to be written left, comma, right,
Negative infinity.
comma, 2. And the 2 gets a bracket. So I have the inequality. I have the number line. And I have the interval. and I need to be able to write my answer in those three ways. Remember that if your arrow is going off to the left, that means it's going to be negative infinity written first in the interval. All right, let's look at number 7. Okay, so if I go to number 7 and come down here where I have a little room to write, it is 3x minus 5 is less than 7 parentheses x plus 1. Okay, what's your first step? Right, I need to simplify, and on the right-hand side, I can use the distributive property. So I'm going to keep 3x minus 5. I'm going to keep a less than. 7 times x is 7x, and 7 times 1 is 7. Okay, what's next?
Subtract 7.
Good. I have got variables on both sides, and I choose to get rid of the one on the right. What does that give you? Negative 4x minus 5 less than 7. What's next?
Add 5.
Add 5 to both sides. I'm trying to isolate the x. So add 5, add 5. That gives me negative 4x is less than 12. Last step. Divide by negative 4. Now I wish that some bells and whistles would go off, that an alarm would sound, because those are negative numbers, which means that the inequality symbol needs to reverse. So I'm going to get x is greater than, and you just get whatever you get. You might get a positive, you might get a negative, you might get 0, I don't know. But when you do that division, you get negative 3. Division by a negative coefficient. Reverse.
You reverse
The symbol. Uh-huh.
symbol.
Yes.
Okay, I was thinking about you reverse instead of dividing, you multiply.
Oh, okay. No. Okay. So now hopefully that makes sense. It's the symbol that flips over. Now you can understand that if you didn't do that step, then everything will be wrong in your answers. As a number line, locate negative 3. If x is greater than negative 3, then it's off to the right. And what will the symbol be? Parentheses. And now what will the interval look like? Negative 3, comma, and then the infinity. Yes, ma'am. So once again, you've got an inequality, you've got a number line, and you've got an interval. Okay, I want to put number 8 up here for you to do, and I will stay silent. Number 8 asks you to solve, and then write your answer 3 ways. 10 parentheses, 3x minus 1, close parentheses, is less than or equal to 5 parentheses, 4x minus 4. All right, in order to solve this inequality, think about my barrier. What's my first step going to be? Distributive property on the left. 10 times 3x gives me 30x. 10 times negative 1 gives me negative 10. Keep your less than or equal to sign. 5 times 4x is 20x. And 5 times negative 4 is negative 20. What's next?
Subtract 20x.
Good. Got to get the variables all to one side. So I'm going to subtract 20x. Subtract 20x. That gives me 10x minus 10. Still have a less than or equal to. And on the right side, I have negative 20. Focusing on this left-hand side, I need to get rid of the constant. Add 10 to both sides. That leaves me with 10x less than or equal to, because I have a negative and a positive, I subtract, keeping the sign of the dominant, negative 10. And what's my final step? Divide by 10, divide by 10.
You flip the
Okay,
property less than X.
do you flip it or do you not flip it?
No.
No. The coefficient is a positive 10. Now, you're dividing into a negative 10, but that's not what the rule said. The rule says, look at this number. And if it's negative, you flip. Okay? So we get x is less than or equal to negative 1. And that should be my first answer. That's as an inequality. Number line. Locate negative 1. Less than is off to the left. What kind of symbol do I put at negative 1? Bracket, good, because it did say equal. It does mean include. And then, as an interval, negative infinity, negative 1. Because you must start left to right when you name an interval. Parentheses, bracket. So, inequality, number line, interval. Whoops. Any questions so far? All right. The next part that I want to talk about, hang on a second. I'm not sure I'm recording anymore. I'm recording. Okay. The next part we're going to talk about has another kind of inequality, and it's called a compound inequality. It's compound. Now, I have a name for it that is not the mathematical name, but it is the between notation. In the between notation, you get an inequality that looks kind of like this. 2 is less than x, which is less than 5. And what that means is x represents any number between 2 and 5. So what are some numbers that are in this between set? 3 and 4. Those are the whole numbers between them. What else is in there? Sure, 3 point something. How about 2.8? How about 4.99? Those are all between 2 and 5. So we're going to talk about these, and let's look at the first one. We start out, we're not solving anything. I'm going to write this first part larger. It says negative 4 is less than x, and x is less than 2. Which the way I interpret it means x is between negative 4 and 2. All right, which of these would be the correct graph, the correct number line graph? Well, the number line must start at -4 and it must end at +2. And it's not going to involve infinity at all. Look at the symbols. At -4, what symbol will I see? I will see, it is a less than. I will see a parentheses because it's not included. What will I see at 2? A parentheses because it's not included. So I know that it cannot be choice B or choice D because those head off toward either negative or positive infinity. Both A and C go between -4 and 2. C has parentheses. I'm sorry, A has parentheses. C has brackets. So which one is correct? A. Is everybody okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the last part says, all right, fine. You have picked the right graph. Now, can you write it in interval notation? Well, just remember what interval notation is. Left value, comma, right value. So what's the leftmost value?
-4.
Comma, 2, with parentheses on both. Infinity is not involved in the between notation. All right, let's look at number 10. I'll write it larger. -8 is less than or equal to y, which is less than 7. And the way I like to read it, y is any number between -8 and 7. And -8 is a possibility. So I'm going to be looking. Now this time all of my choices seem to be nestled, well, between -8 and 7. No, they're not. If you could see this at the back of the room, this one has -7 and +8. And this one has -7 and +8. So A and B are out. C. C has a bracket at -8 and a parentheses at 7. D has parentheses at -8 and a bracket at 7. Which one is correct?
C.
C is correct. There is a less than or equal to sign closest to the -8, so it means it is possibly included. So I need a bracket. What will my interval look like? -8, comma 7, bracket there, parentheses there. The symbols on the interval always match the symbols on the number line. Is that okay? All right. Now, the next thing we're going to do is solve some of these kinds of inequalities. And although at first it might sound like they'll be real difficult, they are not. All right, the first one, we're only going to do 2. If you were to see number 11, it has -8 is less than 2x, which is less than 10. It's still a between notation, but it's not finished because in the middle, it does not say just x. It says 2x. You want it to just say x. So I'm going to go down where I've got more room, and I'm going to rewrite that, and we're going to talk about solving it and graphing it and so on. So this is number 11. I have -8 is less than 2x is less than 10. All right, if I want x all by itself in the middle, what would I have to do? Okay, now first suggestion is to subtract 2 from all the sides. Well, is 2 added to the x?
No.
Now I know you haven't ever seen one like this
Multiplied.
before. 2 is multiplied by the x. 2 is the coefficient. So part of your answer I'm going to jump on when you said do it to both sides. I'm actually going to do it to all 3 parts. What I did disagree on was that you were dealing with subtraction, and we need to be doing division. There is multiplication, so we need to divide. We're going to need to divide this by 2. But in a three-part statement, if you do it to one part, you do it to all parts. There's not just a left and right anymore. Now there's a left, middle, and right. But that was multiplication, so I had to divide. That was the coefficient. What does that give me? Negative 4 is less than x, which is less than 5. My inequality is solved. X is between negative 4 and 5. What does it look like on a number line? I need to locate two numbers. I need to locate negative 4, and I need to locate positive 5. X is between those, so I just draw a little segment between them. What kind of symbols do I put? At negative 4 I put parentheses, and at 5 I put parentheses. Okay? And by the way, why did we put parentheses and not brackets?
Because there's not an equal.
Because it didn't say equal. Equal means bracket. All right? The last thing is, what will the interval be?
Negative 4, comma 5.
-4, 5, parentheses on both. All right, let's look at number 12. I want to solve 5 is less than or equal to 4x plus 1, which is less than or equal to 29. And I will be quiet. Remember what your goal is. X by itself in the middle. X by itself in the middle. So just tell me what you would do as a first step. Okay. Okay. When you have two things to consider, remember that you take care of getting rid of constants first, coefficients last. Maybe we'll go ahead and do it together. All right. We're going to subtract 1, because you always do that before division. So subtract 1, do it to all three parts. What does that give you? 4 less than or equal to 4x less than or equal to 28. I subtracted 1 from all three parts. Now, what do you do to get x all alone? Now I'm going to divide by 4. Well, I was going to do it in red. Divide by 4, 4, and 4. And that's not there. All right. I have 1 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 7. Okay, so I've got the answer as an inequality. Number line. Find 1, find 7. X is between those. What symbol? Brackets. On both sides, because both symbols contained the equal to. And then finally, as an interval, 1, comma 7, brackets on both of them. Yes, sir?
So the number contains the equal sign or less than or greater than is always brackets?
Yes, sir. So what he just said, maybe we need to make a little summary statement about. If you have a greater than or a less than, you're going to use parentheses. If you have greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, you're going to use brackets at the number that it's closest to. Okay, do y'all feel like you can write the answer to an inequality in all three forms? And do you understand the between notation? Okay.